fans, welcome to a very special interview of the Working Fans podcast. You know, we have been playing for months the commercials for Wrestleville. The man called Dave is in the passenger seat, and the man that took you to Wrestleville is in the back seat, and he's going to be telling us about his newest book venture. Please welcome writer Vinny Berry. Vinny, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me on. Always a pleasure to talk to you guys. And yeah, man, thank you so much.
Oh, no problem, Vinny. Happy to have you back on the show. So last time you were working on, I always want to get this right, Pro Wrestling Vault Volume 2. And did that book reach the audience you were hoping for? And you know, did you apply anything to that book that maybe you learned from your first two books? Right.
Yeah, well, yeah. You know what? I'm constantly learning new ways to market and promote, and you know, as I go on. Matter of fact, recently I found this podcast on Spotify about podcasting on podcasting.
Yes.
And I wish I would have found that 170 episodes ago. but it's a learning process all the way, right? And you know, when I was working on that second book of short stories, the volume 2, basically I was working on volume 1 and volume 2 at the same time. You know, it was going to be one book, but I didn't want a book with 500 pages in it. But I was working on them about the same time. And then when I decided to split it up in 2, then I put all my energy back into 1, finished 1, and then I went back to 2.
Did it reach the audiences that you hoped it would? Like, how has that book been for you?
Yeah, you know what? Both those books are pretty good. I will say that volume 2 did a lot better than volume 1. Matter of fact, that volume 2 went into its second printing. I thought, for me, and because it's my baby, right? I really liked volume 1. I just thought, wow. I just liked so many things about it. It was different, and I wanted it to be different. I wanted, you know, a lot of people kind of question me, hey, man, what is it? Is it about old school wrestling? Is it about Gulf Coast wrestling? Is it about independent wrestling? Is it about NWA? Dude, it's about wrestling. It's like, but it was such a hodgepodge. You know, it had stories, it had pictures from the independent scene, and then it had like kind of tributes to NWA champions. So, I'm not going to admit, and then in the back it had like independent wrestlers that people have never even heard of. So it was all over the place, but I liked it for that reason. Second book was a little more contained. And I think because it was contained, maybe that was the appeal to that. But when I take those books to shows and people pick them up and look at them, they're blown away by what's in the book. Once I get that book in their hand, 9 times out of 10, they're buying it.
Yeah, because I think it was I was finishing up, I believe, volume 1. I don't know if I had started volume 2. But I remember I messaged you and I'm like, Vinny, tell me there's going to be a volume 3, because I love the collection of a lot of little stories. Instead of deep diving like huge into one person's story, you got to see all these stories from across the wrestling landscape. And I think I like that because I heard of wrestlers that I never saw before, wrestlers that I remember from years ago. And it was just a great collection of stories.
And that's why I like it too. And, you know, it's funny. One night, my wife saw me in the living room or something, and she was, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "Are we going to finish that show on Netflix or whatever?" I said, "Well, I'm reading this story on Mario Mancini," and she goes, "Yeah, haven't you read that story 40 times?" I said, "Babe, this is a good story."
That's what it is. A good story will pull you in, and like the great thing about that book too is you could read 2 short stories, put it down, pick it up, read 5 great short stories, and then come back, and you're always entertained by however big a chunk you took in.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm very proud of those 2 pieces of work. You know, volume 1, you know, it sold, but it didn't sell what I thought it would. Volume 2 surpassed my expectations. And so, you know, you never know what's going to land with the people, right? What I like about that volume 2, if you look at it, Kerry Morton's in that book. Matty Brinkowski's in that book. Blake Christian's in that book, and Nikita Knight, who is Thea Hale, is in that book.
Couple
All
current
those
NXT
people,
superstars.
I would all call, they're on TV. They're superstars. I mean, they're big companies are seeking those performers out, and so that's what's special about that book, right? I think when there's gems in there, and you're not going to know what's in it until you pick it up.
Vinny, you had said just a while back when we were talking about going to shows and talking, people in reaction to the book. I'm just curious, going to shows or just like getting out there promoting your book. Have you met some new relationships with people, like just wrestling fans who love to just talk to you about pro wrestling now?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's funny is because I'll go to different shows, and I live in South Texas, right? So for me to go to Corpus Christi or to San Antonio or even to Dallas is, it doesn't happen quite often because those are drives for me. But if I go to vacation, we try to squeeze something in. If we know we're going to be there, then I'll say, hey, honey, I got to go. And man, I'll be at those shows and someone will walk by my table and say, hey, I read that book.
Yeah.
They're, hey, I saw something online that you have a new book. I'm waiting for your book. Maddie Rinkowski's dad would come over to the table quite often and talk to me. And, and I enjoyed talking to him. And he, would just ask me about what I was working on and stuff like that. And so you definitely, I because I see so many people in my real job, and I have to ask people like, well, what story was that, or what show was that at, or what, and then they remind me of like, oh, I know exactly who you are, but yeah, you're right, man, and it is that's what it's about. There's nothing more complimentary than someone coming up and saying, hey man, I read your book. I enjoyed your book.
100%. Sure. Now, moving on from the last couple books to the new book, Wrestle Black Bar. What made you decide to do a book on Black Bar? Because I know you do get into it in the book, and it's a bit of an interesting story.
Well, yeah. So I was working on the Volume 1 and Volume 2. And like I told you guys a little bit ago, there was a massive undertaking, I thought, because sorting out what I was going to put in and how I was going to, just going back. And it was a little more overwhelming than I thought it would be. And when the Volume 1 came out, my second book, when it came out, the Pro Wrestling Vault Volume 1, I called a guy who had a podcast, and he had me on his podcast for the Lance book. And so I was saying, hey, man, I'm looking to promote my book. I had a good experience with you last time. And, will you be doing your show? And could I come on your show? And he was like, well, I'm not really doing the show right now. What I'm doing is I'm booking talent for signings and visits and meet and greets and stuff like that. And I said, well, okay. And then he said, which reminds me, I've been working with Black Bart, and he's been looking for an author. And he, can I give him your number and this and that? And I said, man, that might be something I would be interested in, but I'm just so overwhelmed. I can't consider it right now. I can't. And he said, okay. And then when I got caught up, of course, I'm always looking for the next project, right? So I went ahead and I called him back up. He got me in contact with Bart, gave me Bart's number. And then when I called Bart, I didn't say anything. I think I said, hello, Bart. And he was like, Vinny, dadgummit, I've been waiting for you to call me. And I was like, okay. Well, here I am. You know what? This is what he'd been wanting to write a book for about 10 years. Here's what's the sad part is why we were working on this book. He was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and pretty aggressive cancer. And so I wanted to really put in the time to get this done so he could see it. He's still sick. He's still, he's battling. But dude, I mean, That guy is a fighter through and through. That guy is one of the toughest dudes that I've ever met. I kid you not.
I mean, this is a major book. You got a prologue by Black Bart. You have a foreword by JBL, contribution from James Beard, words from Sam Houston, and then you got Denny Brown giving you a quote on the back. Sam Houston again, Andrew Anderson, Kevin Sullivan, Wild Bill Irwin, the grappler Len Denton. Black Bart, having wanted to write his story for so long, I imagine he had notes or something together. Did that help you write the book? Did it help you put the story together for him?
You know what he did, and he's told me this 100 times. He made like recording tapes. Like I think he has like the
old cassette tapes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, kids, this is where the lesson comes in. In the olden days, there used to be this plastic little case that had audio tape inside. Anyway.
Hold on,
the kids
have one on me here.
The generation really, I mean, it's hilarious. But yes, he has those tapes. I don't know how good they are. I don't know, because as you know, that stuff, I mean, that's why we're in the day and age that we are, and
There's a mini tape right there.
Right.
I think that's what they are. But he said he has all these recordings. He said he had a shoebox full of them. But what we did was I talked to this dude, and I recorded the phone conversations, went back through them, recorded again. The difference between doing that with him and doing this with Lance only wanted to do it for 1 hour, a half hour, or 1 hour, 1 day a week. And I got about 40 hours on Lance. Bart was willing to do it when he was available. So, if I was off in the morning, I would call him in the morning. If the only time we never recorded was on Sunday. He didn't want to record on Sunday. He didn't want to do anything on the book on Sunday. That was the only day Lance wanted to do it.
Wow.
That's it. Yeah. That was my last question was, what are some of the difference between working with Black Bart and Lance?
Well, I'll tell you what the similarity was. The similarity was that they were both very giving of their information. Different.
The honesty of the drug and alcohol talk that they both bring up.
Yeah, they were just like, there was every once in a while there was one thing, dude, I don't want that in the book. If it was something that would like maybe hurt somebody or make somebody, there was some things that, dude, it doesn't even need to be in the book. There was respect from them, but they were real willing to tell on themselves about stuff.
Right. I mean, I think that's the character of a good person, though, right? I mean, if you're like, hey, these are the mistakes I made, this is it. But to me personally, there's that loyalty factor. Well, this isn't their book. It's not my story to tell. They can tell their own story. I get that. I got a lot of respect for people like that, personally.
And then, like in Bart, though, I mean, there's something James Beard says. You could, what's he say in the front of the book? I find it very interesting because he kind of pegged it. You can take it from me. If you get nose to nose with him, you will believe everything he says being exactly how he sees it.
Right.
I mean,
Can that describe a wrestler better?
Yeah, and there's a couple parts in the book where he flat out says that dude was a prick. I can't say it any better than that. The dude was a prick. Always was a prick. Is a prick.
How long was the process from when the book first got brought to you? Well, from when you first started talking to Bart till when you got the finished product?
Okay, so I started with him in March of 2022, and it was so funny because, he was like, oh, yeah, let's do it. And I was, whoa. Let's get to know each other a little bit. Look, I said, we might not even like each other in a week. So let's just kind of talk about where we would go with this and what we would do. And dude, before I could ever, because I told my wife, I said, she goes, are you going to do it? And I said, well, no, I'm thinking about it. I'm just feeling it. It's a feeling out process. And then about 2 weeks later, she was like, well, are you going to do it? And I said, yeah, I think I'm already doing it, babe. So we started in March of 22 and till now. And you know what? I was still recording with him to the very end, because I'd go back and, when I thought I had it, and I go back, and then I was like, okay, there's a hole here. Something's not right. Hey, we'll go back. But with Lance, we were done. I mean, we didn't do any more recording. I might send him a text. Hey, what was that thing?
Mm-hmm.
What was your description of this? But other than that, I mean, me and Bart were working on this thing to the very last minute where I sent off the manuscript.
The Lance book was amazing, the stories you got out of him, but this Bart book, it just feels, you could tell the involvement in how much Bart wanted to tell his story because the details are so rich. Like I told you off air, you had me gripped in this book within 10 pages. And then like going on another 20 pages later, something else hits me that I'm like, wow, the human story really pulls me in. And if you're looking for a book about a wrestler that you might not be familiar with, or you remember Black Bart from back in the day, this is a book. And if you have read any other of Vinny's books, you know how good the story is. I gotta ask you, the cover, that is a great drawing. Where did you find an artist this good? Because I had the book for an hour yesterday before I realized it was a drawing. I was like, God, that's an interesting picture they got on there. So where did you get the cover art for this?
That comes from my niece, Alyssa Berry.
Hey, awesome.
Yeah, that is my niece. She is a art major, and she is going to be an art teacher. And I was going through a couple artists that I knew and wasn't gelling with anybody. And I reached out to her and asked her what, where she was at with her art. And she sent me some samples. And so I sent her some pictures, and I said, hey, can you draw me something like this? And she drew me some Lance pictures. Oh my gosh, dude. She did a picture. I don't have it right now, but she drew a picture of David Von Erich. Oh, and wow. That was one of the samples I gave her. And so I said, I sent her this, and she did this, man, and did an amazing job. The reason why, and a lot of people have asked me, hey, what's up with the title? People ask me, and I tell them it's called Wrestle Black Bart. And people are like they're wanting something else, right? Like, they're like, oh, why would you call it that? Well, we wanted it to look like a wrestling poster, or a wanted poster, right? Mm-hmm. But we wanted, when people search it, if they're going to, we wanted them to find the book. We wanted them to find the wrestler, right? Because if you put in Black Bart, the robber comes up there as well. Matter of fact, my niece did some research, and she found a quote. If you know anything about the robber, Black Bart, he would leave like these little, I wouldn't say poems, but these like little clever quotes. Like, I don't know if they were kind of clues to catch them, or, but there was one, and it escapes me right now, but there was one quote that I thought described Black Bart's career. And I'm going to paraphrase because I can't remember exactly, but the quote paraphrased kind of went along the lines as, sometimes you're up and sometimes you're down. And that explains his career.
Right.
like to the T, 100%. But because I was concerned with, if you put that in, you're not going to get, our Black Bart, you're going to get the robber. So we wanted to put the word wrestle, wrestling, anything wrestling with his name. So you wouldn't, and when the cover came out, man, it just like, to me, it was just like, wow. It to me, less is more. It looks good. It's just eye-catching. And thank you for the compliment on the drawing. She did amazing. She did lights out, man.
Yeah, that's an amazing cover. And if people haven't been listening, and if you have this going through your headphones, you should be listening. Vinny, first off, thank you for joining us. Find Vinny at WrestleVille.com, the books, the podcast. But one last time, tell them why they need to buy Wrestle Black Bart.
Well, I think you're going to be surprised by the stories. When I started working on this project, one of my biggest concerns, I said, Bart, you're all over the internet, dude. You've told all these stories, they shoot interviews and everything. And he goes, but there's some of these stories that I haven't told. And I said, give them to me. There's some stories that he's talked about. We go into a little more depth about it. But you'll see, one thing you'll find out about Bart is this dude wanted to be a wrestler so bad that he did everything he could. You get to see his character, right? You get to see who he is. He loves the business. He respects the business. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised that, he was one of the last wrestlers that had a full-on angle with Kerry Von Erich. They were in a feud. A lot of people are going to find out that he trained Necro Butcher, a man who's synonymous in deathmatch wrestling, and this guy despises it. And so I think people are going to be surprised of, I'll tell you this, Dusty Rhodes loved Black Bart. And I've seen interviews where Dusty Rhodes has talked about the loyalty that Ron Bass was, that Black Bart was, the loyalty that these guys did, that he could count on these guys. He talked about why he was
100%.
Successful. I appreciate what you said, and I think the reader is going to be brought in and hooked by his genuineness, right? The genuine of his character, the way he tells his stories. And I think they're going to really get lost in, what happened. There's a story in here, and I'll pass it back over to you. You got to read the one about Bruiser Brody and Otto Vance, because it could have changed the whole dynamics of what really went down had Bruiser Brody gone to Austria and Black Bart didn't. So
is that's
all I'll say. But I will say that story was a gut punch for me.
Is that the chapter you were telling us about just before we recorded, that if there's one chapter in the book that was going to get you a writing job, that would be the chapter?
That is the one.
Authenticity, by the way. I think that's what we were trying to say. Genuineness, the authenticity of somebody like a Black Bart. Yeah, will shine through.
I guarantee you Black Bart would say the genuineness.
There you go. Say no more. I like it.
And if you were surprised by the Lance Von Erich book and how much you learned about Lance and enjoyed it, that you're going to get that 10 times more in this book. So go out, Amazon.com, Wrestle Black Bart, and if you reach out to Vinny Berry, let him know you heard about it on the Working Fans podcast. Vinny, thank you for joining us again. It's been great having you.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure talking with you guys. Thank you so much. You guys have been good friends to me, and I just love what you guys do.